Welcome to the Writer Center's virtual craft chats, where we talk a little bit less about what an author wrote, a little more about how they wrote it. So we're here today with Karen Outen, who has written an incredibly interesting and compelling and page-turning novel. That's all me. You can put it in a Goodreads review. Dixon Descending. So Karen Outen, welcome, welcome, welcome. Will you please read us a few pages from this kind of pulse-pounding book?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So here it is, Dixon Descending. And I'm going to read from the very beginning because I think that's probably the best place to get started without having to give you a lot of backgrounds and that sort of thing. So I'll read for about 7 or 8 minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry. One other thing before you do that, I forgot to say. Gather your questions and put them in the chat. I will use my middle-aged eyes to follow up. I will get to everybody. If you want to put question in capital letters, that helps. But in the meantime, just sit back and enjoy.
Okay, great. All right. March 2011, Mount Everest. This first time, as they hoisted themselves onto the hip of the mountain, they had to simply learn to survive. Survive the landscape, the thin air, the unbelievable cold, the exquisite suffering. Each step of Dixon's crampons on ice was accompanied by a headache so intense, he thought a tiny demon jabbed a pitchfork endlessly inside his ear. His stomach cramped, his tongue swelled against the roof of his dehydrated mouth. He inhaled heavily. At 18,000 feet and rising, his every breath was hard-won, a perfect, exhilarating orb of suffering. His brother Nate climbed just in front of him along a narrow path that stretched between ice boulders. Nate looked back at him, panting lightly but smiling, his black goggles gleaming on his face rock star-like. Man, we're in rare air, Black men on Everest. Dixon repeated it with awe, Black men on Everest, which was to say freed men, because their burdens here were of their own making. Blue-white ice glowed above their heads. They were climbing just above base camp, deep in the Khumbu icefall, a once cascading river frozen mid-flow. A surreal landscape of ice boulders at improbable angles, perched along cliffs. The ground rumbled beneath their feet, a game of dodgeball judging which boulder might tumble toward them. And this only their first acclimatizing trip up the mountain. There would be 3 climbs, up ever higher, then back down, before they attempted the summit. 3 more chances to lose this survival game. An improbable game growing ever more ridiculous, not just skimming boulders, but spanning crevasses so impossibly deep they might emerge on the other side of the earth. They had chosen this, Dixon reminded himself, and squinted into the glare ahead of him. A stunning flash, a warning flare. The sun bounced off the aluminum shell of a ladder, 4 ladders actually, lashed together and spanning a crevasse slit deep and jagged in the ice. And he was expected to cross it. Unfathomable, all of it, crevasses, ice blocks, mountains. A thrill seized his groin. He turned toward his loosely tethered band of 20 teammates, Sherpas and guides, their red and blue and yellow down suits iridescent against the snow. Lunatics did this kind of thing. Lunatics and heroes, Dixon thought, laughing. And which did he think he was? Both, he said aloud. Nate waited for Dixon near the ladders, hands on his hips. Well, this might be it, you know what I mean? Nate leaned close so Dixon could hear him above the wind. It's that hell no moment. He made a sweeping gesture across the icefall. Ahead of them, the ladders were strung with safety ropes and bolted onto the ice on either side of a crevasse. They still didn't look like a good idea. Dixon lifted his goggles and squinted at his brother, who stood one hand on his hip, a sly smile on his face. It was a challenge Dixon knew well. You expect me to believe you're throwing in the towel. Nate laughed. Oh, hell no. He flexed his fingers against each other, tightening his gloves. How about I go first, Dixon said. He did not wait for an answer. Don't look down, Dixon warned himself. But how could he help it? The pale blue walls of ice below him darkened into a bottomless midnight. He stepped onto the ladders, his crampon spikes clinking on the metal rungs. The ladder swayed and complained under him, his body both weighed down and weightless in the thinning air. The wind howled around his ears. His heartbeat resonated in every vein, every muscle, every clench of his hands around the safety ropes. Thin ropes in his hands, slender rungs under his feet, he teetered above earth. A gust of wind bellowed in his ears and seemed to lift him like a kite. A belly drop. Dixon gripped the ropes as he felt himself caught up by the wind. The frightening roar in his ears. Dixon suspended mid-air. It seemed an endless ride on the bounce of wind. He was sure he would be swept away. He could not breathe. He might have expected his life to flash before his eyes, but he saw only sky, endless blue clouds swirling above him. It wasn't death he feared, but the feeling of nothingness, of expendability at the whim of the mountain. That jolt of air swept under him only momentarily, but Dixon was badly shaken. Mountain peaks loomed above him, the crevasse beneath him like a dare. He scrambled across the ladder to the other side, his breath heavy, his body trembling, a beat of fear trickling down his spine. The mountain had given him a stiff warning.
I know I'm supposed to ask you more questions, but I just wish to keep going. And I know what happens. Okay. So we're here to grab you by the ankles, turn you upside down, and say, "How did you do this?" So let's start, Karen, by saying, writer center question, in your own words, who the heck are you?
Who am I? I am, well, I am formerly the most successful unpublished novelist I knew.
Nice.
40 years in the
I'm
making.
that. I'm that.
Are you that? Yeah, I published my first short story 40 years ago this year, actually. So I have been steadily writing essays and short stories. I even wrote a novel about 20 years ago and got an agent. She was unable to sell it. And in truth, I see why now. I understand it was my apprentice work in some ways. So here I am. I'm 63. I'm a debut novelist, and I feel deep gratitude at that. I have worked full time. I've been in and out of full-time jobs and also teaching sometimes, and getting my MFA, and then wondering if this would ever happen or not. And I stuck with it because I couldn't get rid of Dixon. He just stayed with me, and I loved his story, I think.
I'm already tempted to go off script, but
And
so let's go off script. So
welcome to, yeah.
when did you meet Dixon?
After that first novel that my agent couldn't sell, and then she ghosted me. I'm sure this never happens to anyone else, right? Or are there other people out there shaking their heads like, I've heard this story?
Oh, I at the Writer Center have heard the story.
Yeah, yeah. A couple of years went by and I was writing short stories that were really depressing because I was pretty depressed. And one day Dixon appeared to me. I saw him standing in front of the school where he worked, and I could tell he'd been through something. He was gaunt. His face had some kind of damage, sun damage. I didn't know what. He was limping, and I kept sort of seeing this image of him, and it became clear to me that he had climbed Mount Everest. And I thought, what in the world is that about? And what happens now? So he appeared sort of as a gift. I knew who he was. Um, and mind you, this was 15 years ago. It's been a long slog together. Yeah.
Um, so this book did not go where I thought it would go. I made assumptions, bad idea. I thought that the whole story would be about the climb. I thought
Mhm.
this was going to be, well, I don't want to say Sylvester Stallone and Cliffhanger, because that would date me. But the it's I don't want to spoil anything for everybody who should and will buy this book, but it's not really about, I mean, it's about the mountain climb, but it's not about the mountain climb.
Mhm.
It's a much larger story. So without giving away major plot points, and I do see the questions, and we're going to get to those soon. But can you, without giving away the plot, can you describe the structure? Because I thought it was going to be like Black men going up Everest, which on its own is interesting,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
that's not what this is about.
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting because when Dixon appeared to me, it was clear to me that he was living in the aftermath of something sort of audacious that he'd done. And I was really most interested in what was clear to me about him, that something had changed in him. And I was interested in that change. So I think I began thinking about the book in terms of the book I thought about most was A Gesture Life, which is a book in which you see a man's very contained, controlled life, and you know something has happened. And then in the center of the book, you come to understand what his past is, and then you understand all of the things around it. So initially, um, Everest happened in one chunk in the center of the book. And much of it was about Dixon's life outside of it. Dixon is a middle school psychologist. He's at a charter school for boys, and he serves in this sort of role as a hero or a savior because he is really integral to these boys' development, but also he loves that part about himself. Um, but he was formerly an Olympic level athlete. And when his brother says to him, "Man, we can do Everest." You know, he's prided himself when staying, he says, within 2 or 3 months of being able to compete in any race. He's done triathlons, he's done a little bit of climbing in the past, and he didn't want to be sucked back into the business of competing, but he is sucked in enough by his brother, who is a charmer, that he decides to leave behind this role of being the protector and um, taking care of everyone else to go and do something for himself. So, what I had to work on over the 15 years was not Everest so much as the structure of the book because as I said, I buried, you know, all of Everest in the center, and my beta readers were like, No, you can't do that. You got to get us to Everest first." And it took quite a while to get to that place where I was going back and forth in terms of the settings.
So, so a couple of different directions and questions. One is that you seem to know the characters really, really well.
Yeah.
In a way, I've talked to a lot of authors, but I mean, you really know the characters, and I'm interested in whether what the evol what the evolution of that. I mean, you said he appeared to you, but there's a framework where this book happens in multiple locations, and yeah, you're like, yeah, you got to bring Everest in the beginning, but there are lots of mountains in here that are metaphorical. So
Mm, mm.
I think there was a question in there, so pick anything.
Well, yeah, I feel like I do know them well, and I think that that's because of the 15 years. You know, I'd been with them a really long time. And it's such a story, even though there is this dramatic business of, you know, men who are climbing Mount Everest, it is in many ways an internal journey for Dixon. It
Right.
is, I think, so much of the title. Someone asked me once about the comma in Dixon, comma, descending. And I think this is about Dixon's descent, not just from the mountain, but from some of his lofty ideas about himself and who he's been and trying to decide who he's going to be now. So those things felt very visceral to me in lots of ways, really close to me. And in the beginning, I had many more women in this book. And coming to realize that it was a man's story was a surprise to me. I had never written men so exclusively or so closely. And I thought, how am I going to do that? Um, and so that was a big discovery, and it was a big sort of intake of, okay, I better figure out who these guys are. Luckily, I have like about a dozen male cousins I grew up with, and I could rely on some of what I saw among them, but also my cousins, my male friends. I talked to them a lot. I listened to their voices. I sent them emails asking them questions that they'd have to spend some time crafting so I could see their voices on the page. And I could use that to try to construct these men who are men I know, but they are not particular people. They're not built off of particular people.
So that's another area I wanted to get into is, there's a lot of talk in the literary world about whose voices and who can write story. And this is, you're writing, there are female characters, but you are in the heads of
Mhm.
multiple men with very, I forgot that you were not, I mean, I don't, I just sort of like, I was in the story, but I mean, did you have a pushback on that at all? Writing from a male voice, did people say, like, who are your beta readers, or was this just okay?
I had some men as beta readers and asked them specifically, does this feel like a woman writing about a man? And they said they didn't even think about that
I
part.
didn't. Yeah, no, I did not think
Yes.
about it. So
Yeah. And early on in the process, I was dating somebody and we had an argument, and he said to me once, you're kind of like a dude in the way you think. So maybe that helped me a little. Maybe that helped me a little bit. Um, so I did think very much about, can I do this well? And it was important to me to do it well. I really loved these guys, and I wanted all of their flaws, but all of their humanity to come through. And so that's why I spent so much time talking to the men I knew. Yeah.
yeah, no, it shines through. And let's jump on to the question about the title, because I know that a lot of times the author does not have
Mhm.
control over the title. A lot of times our publishers are like, no, 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 we're going to tell you what the title is. And Dixon, comma, descending, for all of you who are going to buy this book and read the book and thank me, means a lot. It's a really powerful title. And I want to know, was that always the title? Did someone come up with that? How did that happen?
There were so many titles over the course of my writing it. And I can't remember. There was a time at which I thought it was really important to have Everest in the title.
Interesting.
Once I started working with my agent, though, she thought, that makes it sound too much like a nonfiction book. So we brainstormed for a really long time until we came up with this title, and we were both thinking, once the book was sold, are they going to tell us to change it? Are they not? And they didn't. I think my editor did ask at one point, is this the title that you really love? Is there something else you think we should go for? But um, this one really stuck. And I think because of what you're saying about how it really encapsulates so many aspects of the story, I think that's why we ended up keeping it. Yeah.
No, no, it really works in a way that a lot of titles to me, I don't shut the book and look back and think, that moment of satisfaction when I see the title. I think it really, and I appreciate the questions. I'm going to ask a few more of my own, and I'm going to get to yours. Um, I want to talk a little bit about imagery, and let's just focus on the word avalanche, because
Mhm.
I saw avalanche. I mean, there are actual avalanches that happen on the mountain, and I actually, personally, was in Switzerland, and I saw helicopters shooting whatever they shoot at mountains to trigger avalanches,
Yes.
and
Yes.
everyone in the town is sort of walking along, and I was like shrieking like I don't even know what it is. I mean, just an
Yeah.
avalanche, if you see it, is just astonishing. So you use that imagery, use it in the hallway of the middle school, because this takes place in multiple locations. There's an internet search where someone has an avalanche of results. So just if you want to
Mm,
talk a little bit about how you um,
hmm.
take the imagery of the mountain and the power of the mountain and bring it into other settings.
Well, it occurs to me as you're talking that I may have been conscious of some of it, but not of all of that. That's
Well,
really
I'm
interesting.
kind of a goddamn genius, but that's fine. Oh, sorry for swearing. Someone edit that out.
No,
But
you're
it's there,
absolutely,
Karen. It is
absolutely.
there. It is there
Yeah.
throughout. It is there throughout, and it's so evocative.
There, and you know, there are some moments where I think I knew I was thinking about that, the emotional avalanche for him. But some of
Right?
those instances that you noted, oh, I don't know that I did that consciously. So I'm glad that works. Absolutely.
Oh,
Uh,
it's there. I've got it highlighted. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
So um, there are a lot of really interesting connections in the book,
Hmm.
right? A lot of pairs, but
Hmm.
also I think it's probably a polydecahedron. I don't know, something. So you've got Dixon and his brother Nate. You've got Dixon and one of his students, Marcus, who's being bullied. And then there's a connection between the bully and Shiloh, who is the bully, and then finally Dixon and the bully, and then just like these pairs that intersect in a geometric, to me, prism. Um,
Hmm.
go. How did that happen?
You know, I think, for me, a lot of this book is so interesting to hear all of this because so much of it was focusing on Dixon really, really closely. Like even, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but even the business of what to tell about Mount Everest. There's so much, it's overwhelming, but I had to be really close to Dixon and see what he saw. So what I know most about him, he's a really good guy, but he's a really good guy in conjunction with his brother. That is the connection and the tie that is foremost in his life. And so, in many ways, the way I think a lot of us do with our sibling relationships, we kind of duplicate some of them in many ways. And I think Dixon does that often. He certainly does that um, when he comes back from the mountain and his life changes a bit and he
A
makes a
bit.
friend of Herbert a bit, yeah. He makes a friend of Herbert and he needs to be connected to Herbert because that's the way he is. He needs to be connected to Marcus, his student, because he needs some primary connection that reminds him of his connection to his brother. And almost everything he does, there is one there are two, I guess, women who are primary in the story. One of them is a cousin, Charlena, and she's sort of the one who leads the boat and who rows the boat, he thinks of it that way as they're out trying to figure out what's going on, she's steering them. He needs these particular kinds of connections, and so that's what I was thinking about as I was seeing who he was in community, um and what I was learning
Community.
in community, yes. And
Community,
what
yeah,
I was,
I didn't think of it that way, but yeah, I mean,
yeah,
even though
yeah.
there are these the spiderweb of connections, it is a community.
It is, and it's also, I think what I became really interested in telling was the story of these different men and how they connect to one another and to connect to each other's burdens in certain ways. And a lot of them sort of unspoken. So I think that they end up in various relationships, helping each other to survive and to carry whatever their particular burden is in the world. And I thought that I know that men do that, and I don't know that we talk about that enough or show it enough. And I really wanted to be able to show that here.
So I mean that's actually just so beautiful because Sherpas, of course, are literally, and
Mm,
they are part of the stories. They're brothers, That is
Yeah, there were
actually
two
part of it,
brothers. Yeah.
carrying physical burdens. That's beautiful.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
right? I mean, that's why I love these craft chats. It's like, let's dig in, and you're like, oh yeah. I'm gonna jump into the chat questions. I have
Okay.
so many more of my own, but okay. I Della asks, if you don't mind my asking, when did you get your MFA? Did you have an undergrad in fine arts?
I had an undergrad degree in English and creative writing, and I went to an MFA program right after undergrad when I was in my 20s, and yeah, I wasn't ready because I was sort of writing stories. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. And the program I was in, everyone else was older and more established in the world. So I sort of played with the idea of going back to school for a long time until I was 42. And then I sort of ran away from home and went to Michigan and went to get an MFA, and it was fantastic. And I was really focused by this time. I was lucky because there were 4 or 5 other people there working on novels who were slightly older. I was the oldest student there, but who were in their 30s, and we connected. And it was really a wonderful experience of building community and network. And I'm still in touch with all of those people. And many of them were my beta readers and cheerleaders. Yeah.
Yeah, and that will just be a personal plug for writing community. Um,
Yes.
which, I didn't know. I was slogging away on my own until 2018, and I found the Writer Center. I was like, oh wait, no, there are people who will um talk to me and help me and
Hmm.
hold my hand and be like, yeah, you did this. No, not so much.
And that's how
So
you know what? I found the Writer's Center when I came home from college in 1982. I already told you how old I am. In
you and me both, honey
1982,
bun. So
I was looking through the phone book and I saw something that said the Writer Center. And I said, is there any way in the world this could possibly be what I'm looking for? And it was. And I made some friends in workshops who've gone on to publish novels and who have been my friends for the past 25, 26 years. So the Writer Center really made such a difference for me. Yeah.
oh, you and me both. I'm gonna jump back to the chat because I see a lot of questions are hitting on. Oh, I like that cup you have there.
Oh, thank you.
Um, you're hitting people are hitting on some of the questions I have. So
Okay.
okay, so one question that I think people are always interested in is like, how do you do this thing? How do you literally write this thing? So Yana says, how do you balance writing with full-time employment, other life responsibilities? What keeps you going when it's sometimes easier to just watch TV after a day of work? And I will dovetail that into my question about um, some people say you should write every day. Some people say 250 words a day. Some people say I only write a month a year. One person said that. So I don't
Yeah,
understand how you could write a month a year, but
no.
that's um, but
Yeah.
what is your writing practice like?
This is so hard. I mean, you do what you're able, and it will change. It will definitely morph over time. This is what I remember when I think about it and I feel guilty. I remember being, because right after undergrad, I went to an MFA program at Sarah Lawrence College. That's the one I was saying I wasn't quite ready for. But one of my teachers was Grace Paley, who was
Excuse me.
extraordinary. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
right. Okay,
So
just drop that in.
I just dropped that in. One day, I had the ultimate experience of, she said, come over, we'll have a chat. I'll make some tea. So I go over to her house. First, we're walking down the street. She stops to meet her friend Tilly, says hello. I say hello. We walk away. And then says something that makes me realize this is Tilly Olsen. We just met on the street. But what Grace said to me was, it seems to me you have some stories to tell. You'll tell them over your lifetime. Don't expect you're going to tell them all the time. And she said, I didn't always write, which I thought, oh, what? She said there were things to do. I had children. There was the war. There were things to do. And, I was 23. So I thought, how could you not write every day and all the time? I get it now. And so I think we have to really be kind to ourselves as much as we are, because that write every day, you have to be disciplined. That may work for some people. What has worked for me more has been binging, making sure that there are long weekends when I can write. I mean, I don't know when the last time was I had an actual vacation, because vacation for me means I'm going to a writing retreat somewhere in the mountains. And I make sure to tell my bosses that it has no internet connection, whether it does or not, and that kind of thing. So I can't be called. But a lot of it is, how do you carve out the time away? Um, on a daily basis, there was a point in my 30s. I'm single, I don't have kids. So that, means I can structure my time a little differently. It also means I'm relying on myself for income. But there was a time in my 30s where I could go to work, come home at 6, grab something to eat, go to bed and sleep until 9:30 or 10, and then get up and write until 2 in the morning. I could do that 3 or 4 days a week. Can't do that anymore. So I think my practice is morphing, based on my energy, based on the flow at work. Um, I am working remotely right now, so that gives me more time, which is both good and bad, right? Because some days the TV just calls you. Just hope so try to make up some stories from the Beverly Hillbillies. If that's what you're watching, think about, well, what happened to Jed Clampett before he hit that gold mine, right? What was it like for him to say, I've struck oil, everybody wants me to leave? What's the story behind that? If you can find a way to spark your creativity, and the thing that feeds you, whether it's poetry or art or whatever gets that machine going that makes you want to write, um, I think that's it. But I I'm not disciplined enough to be able to say you must do this, that, or the other, you know.
It's so interesting as I was listening to you, and I was thinking about other craft chats I've had or listened to, and just people have. I mean, I think that I'm going to say something a little daring here, but I think that one of the fears that I have felt when I say, what's your writing process, is that sort of, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, because it's not that, but it's like, am I doing it right? Am I
Yeah,
doing it right?
right.
How am I going to get to where you are, where I want to be? So let's jump that into yeah, I want to nod along. I'm with you there too. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's my dog. Can we hear her too much?
no.
Okay, good. Okay. So let's jump that into your path to publication. So how did you secure an agent? Was that a difficult process? I will answer that, yes.
Mhm.
Um, so what was your path to publication,
If I'm going to be truthful about my path to
please?
publication, I have to start with the moment where I thought that I was going to strike the manuscript on fire. So in 2018, I had been working on it. I don't know, however long ago that was, probably 10 years, almost 10 years. I got to the point where I thought, this is never going to work. And I was at one of my writing retreats with a friend. I go away a couple of times, and there's so many wonderful places to go around here. And she said, what are you working on? And I said, nothing. I'm going to read. I'm not writing, not doing it. And I really felt like I was striking a match. And every time I did, she reached over and sort of blew it out and said, well, have you tried so and so? No, I'm not doing that. It's over. It's it. And she, how about if you tried this? And I really was at a place where I was really lost, because let's be frank, for most of us who are adults who've been doing this for a while, there are decisions and choices we've made in our lives to support the writing. And if the writing isn't working, if you're not getting whatever it is you think should be your payoff, you wonder, have I wasted my time? What else could I be doing? And I was really at that point, I'm 58 turning 59. I'm thinking, and I've done all these things. I've deferred other things. I've focused on this, and it's just not working. And I got a lifeline. I really feel like the heavens or somebody sent me a lifeline, really, truly, which was a Rona Jaffe Award. They're done anonymously. Somebody somewhere who had read parts of this book had sent it in, and I was nominated. And I thought, the
Oh
universe,
wait, you did not submit?
no,
Oh
no.
wow.
it was an anonymous process at that point. They're not doing the same kinds of awards that they did, but yeah. And I thought, this is the universe trying to tell me to hang in. And so this was maybe 2 months after I had been on that writing retreat, not writing, and being just totally miserable. So that award kept me going. And even after that, the nice thing about the award is that you meet agents and editors at the award ceremony. And even after that, 2 years later, I had revised the book and I sent it to one of the agents who said, this is nice, but nah, it seems like it's already happened in the past. And I said to another friend, that's it. And she said, what do you mean? That's like going on one job interview, not getting the job and saying, oh, this working thing is not for me. I've got to
Yeah,
stop,
first date. So,
Yeah. But I kept working on it and kept working on it. And then in 2022, I sent it to several agents again from that list of people I had met in 2018. And a couple of them remembered me. I think they, the business of these Black men on Everest, people think, I remember that story. And my agent was just wonderful. She saw exactly what I wanted someone to see in the book. She read it and really got it. And we worked on it a little bit more, not a whole lot, and sent it out. And in that first round of 10, everybody said, oh, I'm gonna regret this. There are things I like, but no.
I'm sure you're going to be a big success, and I will be so sorry, and I'll say, oh, I should have had it.
Right, exactly. And you're like, then or what I love is this really stuck with me. I was thinking about it all day yesterday, but no. I'm like, what? But one editor said, if no one else takes it, let me know. So we went back to her and she said, I have some ideas. She did not offer me, a deal or anything, but she gave me 2 hours of her time and about four single spaced pages of notes. And I thought, okay, this is a master class and this is also a test in what I can do. And everything she suggested what I knew would make it better. So I worked on all of that. And then after that, she was ready to take it to committee and get it approved. And we did. And then we did 3 more rounds of revision after the contract. So lot of rewriting. Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't watch this, but I have a feeling that because there's a very popular Netflix thing for some people called Always Be My Maybe.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Always Be My Maybe is like it's like I'm your backup date,
Yeah.
and then it turns out to be a love story. So
Uh-huh.
there you
Uh-huh.
go. Always Be My Maybe.
Yeah.
So I would like to jump into Kathy's question about Everest and your research, because
Mhm.
Everest is a very important feature in this, and it was realistic. It is by far not the whole story, but did you get to travel? Because I was like, she was there.
No. I
Oh, come on. Did you VR it?
No, I got
Very
altitude
convincing,
sickness
Karen.
and I got altitude sickness in Santa Fe once, so I wasn't going to Everest. But there is so much out there about it. And in fact, I had been thinking about Everest since 1996. It had not been on my radar until that famous disaster that became Into Thin Air and then the Everest IMAX movie. And it was on my radar because I thought, who in the world does this? This is insane. And so I would think about it every now and then. And once I saw those pictures of people really going across these ladders that are lashed together over this gash in the earth, I thought, you gotta be kidding me. And it's $65,000 or more. My gosh. So I was surprised when Dixon appeared and it, it turned out he'd been to Mount Everest because I started with the idea that it was completely insane. And as I researched it, I have over here a wall of DVDs. I've got all these books that I read. And in order to capture Everest, I would often either watch DVDs without sound on or capture still pictures and describe what I saw. That's kind of how I approached it. And when I was writing that section, I was at Hedgebrook, the writer's retreat on
Ah, those
Whidbey
cute little
Island.
cottages.
Little cottages on Whidbey Island. It's for women. It is in the Puget Sound north of Seattle. And every afternoon, Mount Rainier appears. It starts like in the middle of the sky and goes up. He just sort of parts the clouds and peeks at you. And I thought he was flirting with me, and I thought he was my muse. And that's what helped me to write that I had gotten away totally. But the other great thing is that apparently Seattle is where they grow climbers. So whenever I mentioned to somebody on that island what I was writing about, they said, "Oh, have you met Joe down the street? He leads Everest expeditions all the time. Have you met so and so?" And that's how I got to talk to some climbers and ask, you know, all kinds of questions, even like, how do you go to the bathroom on Everest? Is it dirty up there? What's going on? But in talking to them about um, climbing, about being real alpinists, who do this constantly and not just for the money, not that transactional experience, as they called it, of the client, I came to understand that they had this different way of thinking about it. They knew they wouldn't always reach the summit. A third of the
Right.
time they wouldn't. Right. They understood that there would be times, and it wasn't failure to them. It was about having a good experience of the mountain, and that they were compelled to do it, and that they saw beauty in the mountain, but also in the camaraderie of climbing with someone. Changed my outlook on it. And I began to see the mountain is really beautiful, and as the experience of it as really beautiful. Now, it's still not something I'm going to do, but I think I understand it a little bit better.
So a little audacity here, folding that back into the process of writing a
Mm-hmm.
novel, right?
Right,
You
right.
don't always reach the summit. It is about the climb.
It is. It is.
Did that
And
work?
no, it does. It does. And that they were able to embrace that and accept that blew me away, because I don't know that it's so easy for us. I mean, like, who wants to write a novel thinking, this may or may not work, but I'm going to try it. You want to, this is
Right?
going to work. I'm going to stick with it, right? Yeah.
Right. But one of the reasons that we have these craft chats and one of the reasons that we support each other as community is to be like, you may not make it to the top,
Yeah.
but we're doing this. We're doing
Yeah.
this.
But
Um,
it's okay for them because they know there'll be another mountain, that this isn't it. They're going to keep going. And that in itself was sort of humbling, I thought. Yeah.
I'm going to ask another of my questions and I'm going to jump back in the chat.
Okay.
But I do want to get to one of our trademark, patented, um, whatever legal words we have, questions, which is there anything about your writing that no one has asked you that you'd like to share? And
Oh,
I
yeah, yeah.
take a minute, think about that. It's a tough
Mhm.
question.
It is a tough question.
That's the kind of hard hitting introspection we're looking for here.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's about the business of failure. I have been
Mm,
thinking about that so much more. There was that great small tome that came out a couple of years ago about failure in writing that I thought opened up a whole new conversation. And I don't know that I have sort of embraced failure, but it's always been a part of the writing. So when I got a book deal, I was driving down the road. I was actually driving to New York to meet with my editor and my agent, and I listened to my playlist, and I thought, I'm gonna have to get a new playlist. There was Indigo Girls, How Long Till My Soul Gets It Right. There's John Gorka, I guess I'll have to get back up off my feet again. I fell down on my big ideas. I mean, there were all of these, come on, you can do it songs. And I thought, while certainly I'm gonna need that again, right this minute, I need to celebrate. And so it is a big shift to go from, okay, I'm almost there. Let me try again. Okay, I'm almost there. Let me try again to, wow, did I make it? you kind of look around like, wait, is this happening? What's going on? So it is a little, it's disorienting. It's lovely and gratifying, but um, we can, we have to figure out how to embrace failing and understand that it's not permanent, that whatever failure you have in this particular um, passage may help the next thing. And I think I learned that because as I said, after revising and revising, I went through 3 rounds of revision with my editor. And I had to take a deep breath each time and throw a little tantrum and then say, okay, she's giving me a master class. This isn't about, oh, I failed. I failed. I thought I made that clear. Oh, that's not it. She's giving me a master class and moving me ahead. So let me pay attention. And it's about
So,
how do we pay attention to our failures and change them. That's hard.
but that's so much what you wrote, Karen. I mean, that's so much what you wrote
Mhm.
because a character does summit Everest, and it is not
Yeah,
sunshine and jelly beans and unicorns and cherubim descending. It's like, wait, no, that's all right, right?
yeah,
I mean, that's what you're
yeah.
saying. It's
That's exactly right. That's right. And then you have to, wow. And then you have to figure out,
right.
how do you still live your life?
How do you
Yeah.
still live your life because you thought this thing was the thing, and there are other things. And if you want to know what my cryptic words mean, buy the book, read the book. Jumping back and write reviews. We only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to get to the questions in the chat. Um, okay, Debbie asks, and thank you for all the caps. What was your process for creating characters, including names, character traits, backstories, etc.? And how did you decide, oh, that's interesting, which characters to add versus cut? Because I don't know who you added and who you cut. Maybe the whole crew showed up intact.
No, there've
I
been,
doubted it. That was just a
yeah,
conversational gambit.
there've been 7 versions of this, which included a third brother, a
Oh,
woman and
really?
her husband, 2 other sets of relatives. I mean, there were a lot of people who have, or, there's like a strew of bodies, a body strewn everywhere, that I got rid of for this book. And part of it was that process that I was talking about earlier of coming to understand that this was a book about these men and about Dixon's relationship with them. And I think that scared me in the beginning because it was so different for me. As for naming, that's one of my favorite things to do. But Dixon came to me with a name. He's Dixon Edmund Bryant, and I knew him. And I knew his brother Nathan John Bryant. So they had their names. The ones that I had to tweak, I think, were no, Marcus and Shiloh. They both gave me their names. Some of the minor characters, I had to make sure that there weren't too similar sounds, like a Caleb and a Chris in the same passage, especially if they were really minor characters, so you didn't stumble, that kind of thing. So those were the ones whose names I had to work on. Often, if I know the character well enough, he'll come with his own name. Yeah.
Question from Jenny Hartman. Karen, you do such a good job of maintaining suspense throughout the novel. This is really interesting to me. Do you ever change the order of events during any part of the revision process? And that, all of a sudden I see sticky notes in order, and that's a really interesting, that
Mhm.
implies that you have the sequence in mind and that you juggle it. So how does that work for you?
Um, that's really interesting. Pacing was one of my issues, and that's one of the things that I worked hardest on with my editor. I mean, I bow to her. She's wonderful. She really helped me tighten it up, and think about pacing in that way. The structure changed a lot over the course of writing the book. As I mentioned in the beginning, all of the stuff was in the very center. And as I thought about it more, I tried it
That's the
out.
mountain. That's the mountain. Is it
That's
in
the
the
mountain.
center?
Yes, yes, yeah, the Everest. Yeah, it was right in the center. And then as it was distributed more around the story, especially moving it to the front, that made a lot of other things clear about, okay, what needs to happen next. And especially because I know I'm trying to tell two stories in certain ways, the story of on the mountain and back at home. And for so long, they just didn't quite mesh well enough. So that was a real big thing. And I got a boost from my friend Elizabeth, who said that after writing her novels, she created an aerial view. And she created a document that would have, okay, this is chapter one. And I took it to the nth degree and added a lot of detail. So I'd have like the first line of chapter one and the last line of chapter one, but also a synopsis of each scene, just one sentence. This is where he goes to do this. This is where this happens. So when I was revising, I could look at the aerial view and see, okay, this is where I reveal this. Well, that's not where it should be. It should be there. And being able to play with that as opposed to having to keep digging back into the novel. I mean, the synopsis, this aerial view was probably 7 or 8 pages long, and it changed with each draft, but it really gave me a means of keeping track of, I would, who is in this chapter, who are the characters, where is the heart of it, in bold, this is where this is revealed. This is where he meets this person. I could really, really keep track of those key moments when I needed to revise. Yeah.
We only have 5 minutes left. I have 3 questions, so I'm going to give you all three.
Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay. One is, and I emailed you this, when I finished this story, I had a level of satisfaction and just goosebumps. Like the end, getting the ending is tough. Anyone will tell. And when I shut this book, I was deeply satisfied. And I want to know if
Ah.
I want to know about the journey of that. That's question one. Question two, not related. What are you working on now? What's next? And question three, also not related, but also try to fit it all in, is what's one piece of advice for writers just starting out?
Okay.
So the first one is, how did you give me the goosebumps? Because it was just so, like,
Yeah.
just hug the book closed. Just such a beautiful, to me, ending. How
Thank
did
you.
that happen?
Beginnings and endings are easier than middles, I find.
Really?
Yeah, for me, they
Well,
are.
you're a mountain climber, so clearly.
But also, I really wanted to leave you with some hope. It's a devastating book in some places, so I needed to leave you with hope in the same way that I needed to make the mountain beautiful because it is a brutal place. So there has to be something drawn there. So that was really deliberate in terms of what I was thinking. Um, the second, what am I working on now? I started working on a new project, got about 150 pages in and realized, yeah, no, that's not it. That there was a new character I'd introduced to the story that I had started a long time ago, and I was more interested in the new character. So I'm only about 20 pages in, but it's a woman, and I'm gonna sort of follow her life, and I mean, the men were wonderful. It's nice to be working with a woman again, I have to say.
You know,
And
don't always get up the mountain.
yeah,
It's not
yeah,
about always getting up the mountain.
right. It's a quieter story, but it's also about, okay, cool. I think I can do this again. I remember her. And a piece of advice, it sounds easy to say, but man, hang in there. Don't give up. There will be so many times where you sit down and think, what am I doing with my life? I remember asking my friend Martha Cooley, who's a novelist, and I met her at the Writer Center in a workshop years ago when we were in our 20s. Would our lives be happier if we stopped this writing thing? And she was like, of course, they would be easier, right? They'd be easier, but not happier. So, hanging in there and believing. I have met 4 or 5 different writers who became debut novelists in their 60s and 70s. People who'd been writing all along, because the myth is often that, oh, you just pick it up because you're retired. No, no. Those of us who have been slogging through and learning and failing better over and over. So hang in there. It's about um, as much resilience as you can find, even when it doesn't feel like you have it. Yeah.
I'm going to call that a wrap. that's a mic drop. So yeah,
Thank you
so
so much. This has
Karen,
been
I have
great.
really enjoyed this. And one thing I've really enjoyed is how deeply personal the story, even though you haven't been to Everest, you're not a man. I just I really feel as though this story is something about you, and that you've really shared that with us, and I'm grateful for that.
You know, my mother says that too. And she says that to me. I know who this is about. It's about you. And I'm like, no, it's not. She said, read your book sometime.
Yeah, no, your mom and
Oh,
I should have
okay.
coffee because I see it too. So thank you for sharing so generously of your time. Buy the
Oh,
book,
thank
buy the book,
you.
buy the book,
Buy the book, buy the book. Thank you all
write
so much.
reviews,
Yeah.
reach out to your library. If everybody does that, somebody said there are like 100,000 libraries.
Mhm.
Anyway, big love, big hugs. Thank you
Thank you
so much
so
for
much.
sharing.